Just install a sink right next to your big tank. I'm kidding, don't worry, but I'm also kind of not. Like, there's a cool little thing that we're going to build later in the video that's going to make changing my water even easier, if you can believe that. But there's obviously way more to the story about how often you should change your fish tank water, if you should even do it. It depends on so many things, so we're going to talk about all that today, and then hopefully give you some good advice for setting up a fish tank that is not going to require a ton of water changes. I've heard people say before that if you don't like to change water, then you just shouldn't have a fish tank. And I think that's kind of true, but it's also kind of not, because I personally don't like to do water changes that often. So I've adopted a few different methods about the way that I set my tanks up that really limit the amount that I need to do. Because changing your water is not something that is 100% required of every tank in every situation. There's a few really good reasons for doing water changes or even regular water changes, okay? So first one being if a tank is new, you're going through the cycling process and you're still dealing with stuff that can be harmful to the fish like ammonia. This is going to be particularly important to monitor, especially if you have a pH higher than 7, because we know that ammonia is more toxic as the pH increases. Early on in your journey, you might run into issues with different types of algae, all of which are totally normal. You can't set up an aquarium and go through the entire experience without having things pop up like that. But a lot of times those issues are prompted by excess nutrients that find themselves in your tank, especially in those early few days. So getting into a habit of just doing a routine once a week, 25%, maybe it's even a 50% water change on a new tank, does seem to have its benefits, mostly in keeping concentrations of things like nitrogen and phosphate at a lower level if they happen to be high. And that segues perfectly into just an excess of nutrients, a eutrophication, if you will, of your fish tank. Something that's not uncommon, particularly in the early stages when there's not enough bacteria and other microorganisms to try and kind of control those concentrations. So doing water changes can help reduce those concentrations and then thus slow the increase in a problem in that area, right? Like a type of algae that's taking over or trying to. Another reason to do water changes is like you have some sick fish in the tank, you isolate them. Part of the routine can typically be to do big water changes on the main tank, or if you're going to treat the fish in the tank, water changes are typically a part of that. It's just going to help to reduce the amount of that pathogen load, whatever it might be. And that's really the whole point of water changes, is to try and dilute a problem. And you're either going to do that on a regular basis or you're going to do that as things come up. And that's kind of up to you and just how you keep your fish tanks. However, I think that on certain fish tanks, especially established ones like the one behind me, doing routine water changes or even just doing really big dramatic ones aren't necessarily that beneficial. I think that might come off as almost a controversial statement. I hope it doesn't. I'm not trying to do that here in this video, but I just think that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. At least that's my mentality with it, and I think the proof is in this tank, it's in some of my other tanks. It's not in every tank though, because every aquarium is different, and you can't say one thing is for sure in this hobby because everything is just so different. Before we get into the fun stuff of this video and actually get up and move around and do some stuff, I'll give you the TLDR, I think that's what they say on Reddit. If you want to make a fish tank that requires probably the least amount of maintenance and work on your end and stress, this isn't all just about being lazy, I promise. I don't care what size of tank it is, you're just going to want to fill it with as many plants as possible. You're going to want to have a good biologically active substrate that you're going to get over time. If you use potting soil, if you use any kind of manufactured soil in the aquarium industry, they're both going to work great. And then you're just going to want to not put a ton of fish in the tank. And in the same breath, don't dump a ton of food into your aquarium, because fish themselves and the food that you feed are the main input in this whole equation. Too many fish, too much food with especially too much light, and pretty much any tank, no matter how well you set it up, no matter how many plants you put in it, is still probably going to end up not the way that you want it. So good substrate, lots of plants, as many as you can afford, a decent amount of fish, less is more. Feed a really good fish food, something like, legit fish food, one that is really digested by the fish, and that way the fish poop that ends up in the tank has less nutrient in it or less nutrient potential. And then don't overdo it with the light. And you should have, at the end of that, give it a few months, be patient, Do a couple water changes here or there throughout the process, especially if something kind of weird arises that you can identify as something that you can dilute with a water change. And I think the result is going to be something that you're really happy with. Anyway, that's my quick and dirty spiel on water changes. Now, me personally, and this goes for my display tanks, I'm talking about like this guy that I had behind me. I'm talking about the bonsai tree tank inside, and I am not talking about the fish room style fish tanks that we have over here at the corner, because these are kind of a whole different beast. Like, there's different things going on in here. We don't have a ton of plants. We have probably more fish than we would have in this size of water volume than we normally would if it was a display tank. And we feed these guys a ton of food, okay? So these are things that just are naturally going to promote algae issues and more nitrogen than we probably want to have in the water. So these are tanks that are going to require us to have to pay attention to and to do more water changes than I would like. But that's okay, because I'm not the type of person to hate doing water changes. I'm not trying to be lazy, although sometimes it is nice. We just try and set it up to where every tank is as close to something like this as possible. This is a tank that, despite the fact that it doesn't have CO2 running, it doesn't have a ton of super aggressively growing plants, it still doesn't possess any amount of detectable nitrogen in the form of nitrate or any of the other species. It also doesn't have really any detectable phosphate or iron or the typical things that are associated with eutrophication and then algae blooms in the wild, but it's not perfect, okay? There are some issues in here. If you just came over and you looked at this tank, you might be like, how is any of that possible? Because as you might have already been able to tell, there is like a pound of mulm down here, okay? It doesn't look great. I have been a little lazy on this tank, sorry for all the reflections, but if we zoom around, you can see like a little cyano there that has been there just stuck in stasis mode for forever, but there is just tons of this mulm, detritus, whatever you want to call it, littering the bottom of the tank. Even though I haven't really gone in and intentionally changed the water in this fish tank in, I mean, months and months and months. I couldn't tell you exactly how long. I think you might be able to see now, at least from my perspective, that I just don't see a reason to do that. The only reason why I would come in here and actually change the water is to remove the physical stuff that's in the tank that I don't want to look at anymore. So that's what we're gonna do today before we make our almost little invention that I came up with. Most of the time I'm usually just topping this thing off because it's so hot in here, the dehumidifier is running all the time. We get a lot of evap, and you know, since we installed the sink, topping off this tank has been a heck of a lot easier. I'm super glad that I slapped together this kind of weird sink. I'll put some B-roll of how exactly we did it over the screen, but for my entire fish tank existence, pretty much, it's always been kind of tough for me to get water. So best case scenario, it's a python going across the living room to the kitchen, or at like the house after that, it was the closest thing was the back spigot, so we were constantly running a hose into the unfinished basement. Like, I've never had, I mean, even this setup that I have here isn't like a very cushy fish room, but basically it's just a Lowe's fabricated like drop-in utility sink. It wasn't something that I was going to be able to get water from the house, so we don't have hot and cold water, we just have cold water. I had to reposition a few things, and it is just a hose that's plugged into, you know, one of the like levers, the cold lever, right? So we're going to have really cold water in the winter. I don't think it's something that is going to totally freeze. I didn't bury the line. Like, this is not a professional job whatsoever. I'll definitely have to drain this line and then not run it when it is frozen. Luckily for me, that doesn't happen very often. Most of the months out of the year though, this should be plenty for me. I don't really need to worry so much about the temperature issue because, again, the water changes that I do aren't super big. Like, maybe it's a 20% water change on a tank like this, and I don't think that really shifts the water temp that much. Topping this thing off is just super easy though. Like, all we gotta do is, boom, barely reaches, and then kick her on. And then watch this little part for dripping over the edge. I caught that doing it one day. Make sure we throw in a little dechlorinator while we do it. Always a good idea to do that because you never know what the municipal water people are going to be doing to the water. They like to mess with it, particularly this time of year. Go ahead and turn this off because we're going to be doing some more work, but a heck of a lot easier than what I was having to do before. which was drag the hose from across the yard, bring it inside, like super annoying. But what about draining it? Like obviously super easy because the sink is right here. All we'd have to do is just use any tube, start a siphon. But I wanted to take that like one step further and make it a little bit more lazy. Insert this thing, my almost invention. So it is exactly what you probably think it is. It's a thing that's gonna hang over the edge of the tank, suck water through here, ball valve so we can control it, and then it's gonna drain right into the sink. There's a couple things about this that I wanted to modify so that it wasn't super dangerous. Obviously we got those rummy nose tetras in there. Any fish basically that could hit this 1-inch PVC pipe, it could do some damage to our fish, and we don't wanna do that. So there's a couple different ways we could go about this. You could take some kind of like a pop bottle, make a cone, right? Like think of a siphon tube. The bigger the tube, the slower the velocity, so the less dangerous it's gonna be until the fish reaches this point at it. I think what we're gonna do, because this is just for draining the water level down, is I got some like mesh stuff. I got a big sheet of this. We need to cut it and we need to put it on the end of this. And you know I couldn't find my glue gun to save my life, so I had to go buy a new one. Fun, right? I'm trying really hard not to burn the house down, but like the hot glue gun's hot. It's been so long since I've used one of these. It can't be this hard. Glue is in. It is not shooting glue yet. I went ahead. Can you tell that I forgot to turn the camera on? I cut this little square just so it's easier to work with. We don't have to hold this huge sheet. I think what I'm gonna do is once this glue gun works, we're just gonna put this on there, hot glue her, and then trim the outside of it. That's gonna prevent any fish or weird stuff from coming in. You could use a bunch of stuff for this. Like you could use a piece of netting. You could take a fish net, put it over this, rubber band it, and just call it good. Like you're not gonna be, this piece isn't gonna be sucking up any material, so in theory, it shouldn't be getting clogged. So it shouldn't matter like what we put over this thing. We just wanna prevent fish from getting sucked up, right? Pretty straightforward. This glue gun is on high. It's been so long. I don't think I've ever, oh, there we go. I haven't used hot glue for aquarium stuff or anything that's in an aquarium in a super long time, maybe even ever. I know that a lot of people use it instead of like silicone, and that's basically what we're doing here, just so we have something that's usable right away. We don't have to wait like 24 hours. But it should be all good. Like hot glue, pretty aquarium safe. I feel like that's something that is widely accepted in the hobby. And now we can just trim the excess so it looks all clean. Not bad for this project, super straightforward. Again, super like only applicable to very few circumstances like the one that I have with the sink right next to it. I guess if you had a big tank and you didn't have a sink, if you had a big trash can next to it and you wanted to have an easy siphon start-stop thing going on, you could do it that way. This is actually something that I came up with like 5 years ago, or at least when we were at the old place. And I just never did it because I just never had that trash can next to it, right? But now it seems like the perfect time to do it. I had this thing all built out except for the length of the downpipe and just never finished it. But now we can actually do it. So kind of excited for how like not exciting this whole project is. Something that I should probably do that I'm not going to is cement all of these pieces, because the idea is that there's going to be water in this all the time. Granted, there's not going to be a lot of pressure. It still could leak, and some of these connections are feeling kind of loose. So if it does, just know that I'll come back and I'll cement this all together and make it like a perfect thing. But in the meantime, we want to make sure that this thing works before we like make anything super permanent. Hopefully you can see that. And that goes down lower than I thought. I forgot that we needed to cut the tube, and we wanted to cut this so that it was just like a reasonable length down. You can see right now it goes all the way to the bottom. I don't think there's ever gonna be a circumstance where we want to do like a 95% water change on this thing. But as you can see, it goes right into the tank. We'll obviously prime it here in a second. We'll check it out, see how it works. But we do probably wanna cut this pipe in half. It was like a cool way to do it. And it's something that's hidden. Like if we step back from the tank, we can't even see it's there unless we peek that way maybe. You could spray paint this with whatever people use, Krylon Fusion or 2X, Rust-Oleum 2X or whatever, if you wanted to paint it black or to match your background. Then you would definitely not see it, but that's that. Now we just need to start the siphon, which, of course, I don't know if I have a tube that's big enough to attach to this. I'm sure we could do the thing because we can bend it where you tilt it or whatever, but I think we're just doing this old school. It works. The rummy nose tetras are intrigued by it though. I'm getting quick to close the ball valve just in case they get too close. This is something that could still suck themselves to, right, on accident. That is something that I'm just kind of waiting to see if it does happen. Let me make sure. Let's see if we get that closed. And let's see, is there any drips? Is this dripping? Yeah, that might be dripping. We're gonna get this thing all cemented, guys. I basically just wanted to get to this point. And then, yeah. So if we ever need to come in and do an emergency water change, all we have to do, open the ball valve, start draining. That's draining pretty good. Again, 1-inch PVC. You could do it with 2-inch PVC if you really want to suck some water out of your tank and make it faster, but I don't know, it's working pretty good. This is faster than me doing it with a Python probably. But I'm not trying to do like a full water change right now. What I do want to do is get in here and like physically get rid of a bunch of the mold that's in this, because it's not really serving a purpose, right? It's not a source of anything negative in the aquarium. There's no issues with algae or anything with this tank, but it's just pointless material that's been in the aquarium for a super long time, and I'm kind of tired of looking at it. And if I'm being honest, it makes for great 6-second Facebook videos. I need to get a shorter Python for this room, amongst other things that I need to do in this room, but this is a lot better going to the sink. I'd rather go to the sink with way too much tube than have to drag it through to the other side of the house. Unkinking this thing in here is gonna be a nightmare. I need some clamps too. Where's all my clamps? I think I just need more space for stuff. Okay, now just don't fall out of there. If I had to make an educated guess, all of this stuff that's down here, this mold, detritus, whatever, I would say it's pretty chemically inert. Like, it's been down here for so long. I think it's primarily just all of the decomposed, like, undigestible stuff that's left over from fish poop, plant material, all kinds of stuff like that. And it just kind of collects down at the bottom. And depending on your substrate, you're either gonna really see it or you're gonna kind of see it, or in the case of this tank, like, it's so built up, like, you have to see it eventually, and then you deal with it like we're doing right now. I know it's pretty unsightly and different people are gonna think different things about it, but it is just a natural component of a closed system like this. So again, I don't think it's gonna do any harm to anybody. Sure, I mean, if it was all really fresh, mostly fish poop, which it's not, and it was from a food that was not very well digested, like, it could be something that adds to the nutrient pool in the tank. But again, we don't have a nutrient pool in this tank, or at least a detectable one. So with no nitrate, it's hard to say that this contributes to that, right? At all, probably, maybe tiny little concentrations. But they're not something that is going to impact the system and cause problems in it. That's my take, at least, and I don't think there's really any evidence to support the opposite of that, but who knows? So I'm just gonna make my way around the tank here. This is gonna take a lot longer than probably I thought it was, especially because this siphon is so slow. Like, with it just going to the sink and not having that much of an elevation drop and just using gravity here, it is going to be a little bit of a slower process, but that's okay. I got nowhere else to be right now. This is kind of like my zen happy place anyway. There's so much back here at this cave, right? Like, one of the issues with this aquarium is that it doesn't have a really good flow. So this is material that would, if we did have good flow, it wouldn't be resting down on the substrate. It would be probably caught up in the filter, which would make cleaning the filter something that we needed to do a super long time ago. Something that we do need to do today, and it's one of the excuses for why we're doing all this work today, is because my filter is not flowing super great. So that is part of it. Again, it's like, it's either gonna be here down at the bottom of the tank, or it's gonna be in the filter, slowing it down faster. So not bad. I mean, I think we got a decent amount of stuff out of here. It's not perfect. The goal wasn't to get absolutely everything, but you know, with this super slow siphon, I kind of worked to the point at which I was happy with it, and we don't want to change too much more of this water because, again, we got to kind of match it with the cooler water that we are going to put in here. So I think we're going to call it here. Got to wrap this monstrosity up. But the only other thing I want to do is just do a quick little job on the filter, probably recharge, or not recharge, but put in some new Purigen and an extra bag, kind of get the pre-filters all figured out, because that water flow is not great, and it's the only thing that we have in this tank. The wave pump that I was using kind of freaked out the rainbows, which was weird because, I mean, rainbows, they like flow, right? But these guys didn't. They were super scared. I don't know if it was an electrical thing or something with that particular pump, but I just never went back to it, and the tank's been fine without it, other than the collection of all the stuff that would be in the filter, which, honestly, I'm not super mad about. I think I'm just gonna mess with the two top portions of the filter. I don't think I'm gonna do, maybe, I might not even mess with this one, I guess too late. But as you can see, this one is where I wanna put the new Purigen, and this guy is just like a cake. Like, this is gonna be, this is gonna be squeezing stuff out for forever. Just like the pre-sponges. I didn't show that, but those took a while. I think we might just ditch this whole piece and just go Purigen, because we have plenty of mechanical filtration before that anyway. I'd have to go back and watch that video to find out where we put the Purigen in this thing. I think we put it down lower than normal. I mean, we didn't put it in the right spot. I know that. You want to put it like right at the end of your filtration. I don't think, honestly, it matters a whole lot. From like a flow perspective, it certainly doesn't matter, but I think any kind of water polishing stuff you do want to have at the last step. But it obviously worked on the tank regardless. We'll try and do it the right way this time. Almost forgot to pre-wash it, because that was a thing that happened last time. Again, another thing that it wasn't a make or break it, like we just had a sort of a discolored tank for a little while, and we definitely don't want that this time. So I will go pre-wash these really well. And guess what? I can do it right here in my sink. I don't have to go into the house to do it, or do it in a bucket of water. All right, we rinsed and soaked the Purigen this time, and we cut the pre-filter a little bit smaller just so we have a nice little compartment here for that stuff. And then I think everything is gonna fit perfectly. Cross our fingers. Yeah, perfect. Now we just need our pre-filter sponge. Get this dude back in. Well, we need the lid first. Trying to not pull the cords because they're hard to get back in, but such is life. All right, boom, boom, boom. Very precariously balancing this on. I gotta figure out a better system for this, but we're just gonna fill really, really slow. Make sure to throw in a little bit more of the Fritz Pond Guard or whatever we got over there to make sure that we don't get any chlorine issues in the tank. And then, yeah, I'm just gonna hang out, drink some coffee, and make sure no problems come up. I think I'm gonna call it there. We'll leave a little bit of room up at the top, just let everything kind of float around. Digging having some flow back in this thing, it's kind of nice. For me, because I spent so much time in the tank, it's nice to have that flow back. I'm actually gonna write on the tank the date that we did all this. What is it? May 22nd. Water change. So just so we know, so next time we take a look at this tank, if I say, hey, we don't do water changes on this tank for 6 months, you can tell if I'm making things up or not, or at least I won't forget. That's what happens. If I were to guess, my best guess would be that we kind of do work like this maybe once a quarter on this tank. So roughly every 3 months, and I'm sure there's periods where I just go 4 or 5 months without doing anything like this. But again, the whole point of this video is to just show you that you don't necessarily need to because nothing's wrong. And I don't think what you should take from that is that water changes are bad. We did just go in and we disrupted the ecosystem a little bit, right? Even if that stuff is totally inert, we moved substrate that was definitely biologically active, and we did a handful of other things. We changed a bunch of the water. So those are all things that can impact a system, but this thing is so like bulletproof and robust, I just don't think that it's going to be something that sparks any kind of issue. So yeah, the second TLDR is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And in this case, we did something that we wanted to do because we wanted to change what we were looking at, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I think that is the video, guys. Not exactly, I think, the video that I wanted to make in my head, more of like a hang out with me in the fish room and listen to me yap about stuff, but there were some things that I wanted to show you, some of the updates of how things are working for me out here that I thought maybe you would think was interesting, and maybe you found something helpful in all of this as well. So yeah, I'm gonna sit back, enjoy my tank for a little bit more today. Obviously, gotta go in and edit this video. If you could put more fish in this tank, what would you put? Like, I was looking at this aquarium the other day and thinking like, maybe I should get more of the same stuff. Maybe we should put more rummy nose in it. I'm not sure. I think it needs something. I don't want to change the rainbows. I like the rainbow fish. I think I maybe get a couple more females to balance things out. I don't know where my third one went. It's kind of a recent thing. I'm leaning towards just more rummies because I think it would be cool to have some more schoolers in there because they're so good at it. Anyway, I'm yapping again. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here before I say too many things that literally have nothing to do with this video. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next week with another video.